So, welcome to this second course. Our theme this time will be how to practice in everyday life. To give a quick review of our first course, going further, going deeper in meditation, we looked at the active practices, the mindfulness of the body, the mindfulness of breathing, metta, bhavana, and the receptive practices, formless meditation, and just sitting, where we focused on the receptive element. Focus so we can bring the receptive element into our active practices as well. And then we moved on to recognizing the hindrances. The hindrances that often lurk underneath our actual experience, that we need to unearth to be able to effectively work in meditation, our last theme. And of course, meditation is a great tool for change, for deep change. But even if you meditate 30 or 40 minutes every day, it's not really very much in the context of our everyday lives. So to complement our meditation, this course will look at how to practice in everyday life. It will also help us connect our meditation to everyday life, our meditation experience to everyday life. How do we bring in what we experience in meditation? And connecting our everyday life to meditation. How to act and speak and think, minute by minute, in a way that supports us and allows our meditation, when we sit down to meditate, to go deeper. In a nutshell, the aim of this course is to look at how we live to help us meditate. I'm looking forward to sharing this adventure with you. So, how we live. How we live means what we do. More often than not, what we regularly do, again and again. Our habits, even our deeply ingrained habits. What we do also means how we act with our body and what we say. Buddhism tells us also that it's important that we give attention to how we think and what we think, even in the privacy of our own mind. It's an action that has effects on us and others. So how we live is how we act, how we speak, and how we think. In a nutshell, we could say it's our ethics. Ethics isn't always a very attractive word. It's a question for you now. Is ethics an attractive word for you or not? Or is it a bit dull? If it is, well, why is it? If it's not, well, what's your story for it not being so? The first question that you could tell us your experience in the chat of our groups. Because ethics often isn't an attractive word. Let's begin with anticipating some of the difficulties and saying what Buddhist ethics is not. First and foremost, Buddhist ethics is not a set of rules given by a god or an ideology, a political system. More importantly, a set of rules that we didn't choose, that we could feel doesn't take any notice of us, ignores us, ignores who we really are, forces us to keep hidden what we really are, and rules to which we have to even feel that we sacrifice ourselves and get punished if we don't. It's not surprising, it doesn't seem very attractive. So the source of Buddhist ethics isn't external. It's not a god, one ideology, or a political system. It's not political correctness. From one point of view, yes. The ultimate source is the Buddha. Some of you might be saying, and I agree with you, but you don't have to obey him. There isn't a Buddhist police. Nobody's forcing you to watch these videos or forcing me to make them. But from another point of view, the source of Buddhist ethics is ourselves. It's who we really are. The guidelines are helping us become who we really are. Seeing the true nature of our hearts and minds. And you can say that bringing these two sources together, the Buddha and ourselves, so they become one, is a process of spiritual development as well. And we discover who we really are by getting more and more deeply in touch with ourselves, more and more aware of ourselves, of the good bits and the bad bits and the ugly bits, the good, the bad and the ugly. And making the good bits grow by giving them attention and encouragement. Making friends with the bad bits and learning to love our ugly bits. So Buddhist ethics doesn't really sound too different from Buddhist meditation, really, looking at it from this point of view. So the more we've discovered who we really are, the more we're in touch with who we really are, which for me is certainly the most precious thing I have. Then the more we'll have a natural empathy with others. It'll be only natural that we'll want them to be in touch with who they really are. And in this way, we can see the essential unity between us, and that benefiting them benefits us, benefiting us benefits them. So ethics means relations. Ethics means relationships. Relations with who? Relationships with who? Well, firstly, probably obviously, friends and family. People close to us who we know well. Then neutral people. People we pass on a pavement, or sit with for a short while on the metro. But also people in other cities and countries, many of whom we'll probably never meet. In brief, the world at large. And also it means difficult people. Maybe people who are trying to hurt us, or defeat us, or who we're trying to hurt and defeat. Or people we simply don't like, we find unpleasant, look down upon them, or they who do the same to us. Or people who just see the world differently due to ideology, religion, or simply as a consequence of the media that they watch. Maybe it's just people who like a football team that we don't like. But also our relations with the world includes animals, our pets and wildlife, and other living beings, birds, fish and insects, and plants, the inorganic world, rocks and mountains, forests and lakes, not to forget tower blocks and rubbish heaps and sports stadiums. For all these people, beings and objects, we can develop a supremely receptive and open state of mind and act and speak in a way that expresses it, all on the basis of starting by being in touch with ourselves, being in touch with who we really are. Wonderful, isn't it? But there are other ways to develop our ability to relate with greater awareness. We can practice awareness in everyday life by giving people our full attention. For example, really listening to what they say, looking at them when we speak. Also, dropping ideas, labels, judgments, and assumptions, so as to see them as they really are, see what's there, seeing them how they see themselves. Instead of clinging to our assumptions and opinions, we can ask questions, encourage an open, curious attitude, focusing on what's right in what they say, rather than focusing on what's wrong, and being willing to be wrong ourselves, valuing the truth and getting to the truth above being right. Relating with greater awareness will naturally lead to relating with greater sympathy and compassion. If we are really aware of another person, we'll be aware of what they're feeling. We'll be aware of their struggles and hardships. Relating also with greater freedom, which means actively looking for that taste of freedom in our communication. When we're talking, we always have a choice. What we can say next. There are different options. We can scan our experience and look for what's there that leads to the greatest freedom, rather than just saying something to get something for ourselves, to show what we know, or just out of habit. So relating with greater awareness of the other person means with greater sympathy and compassion, and a greater sense of freedom. All this we do on the basis of a more aware state of mind. So we'll do a guided meditation now to get more in touch with developing these qualities. So in a moment we'll start our guided meditation. But before we do, I'd like to say just one more thing. Answering the question, why are we doing this now? It's simply that if we can imagine something, either as our own quality or a quality that somebody else has, then that imagining is a big step forward. A big step forward to developing and actualizing that quality in ourselves. So we'll start meditating in a moment. I'll put the bolster, as always, behind my back to help me keep a good upright posture. or meditating in a chair. So when you're ready, just arriving here in your body and in the room. Listening to all the sounds around you. Letting your body relax and be supported by the floor. Being open to all the feelings and sensations. Encouraging a warm, open, intimate, and curious attitude to your body and feelings. Encouraging the good. Befriending the bad. And loving the ugly. As we sit in a state of openness and receptivity, and remembering a time when you had a heightened awareness of someone, a friend, heightened awareness means clear memories and strong emotions, strong, clear emotions. Memories of a meeting, a conversation. Did many memories come back? Are many memories coming back? Now, remembering a time when you felt a greater sympathy or compassion for somebody. Who were they? Where were you together? And why did you feel so open-hearted? How did they feel, both at the beginning and the end of your communication? Giving your attention to these memories. Does anything else come back? And finally, remembering a sense of freedom with somebody. In your conversation or meeting with somebody. Where were you? What were you talking about? And why was there a sense of freedom? And how could you find that sense of freedom now that you've identified it? How could you find it in other communications? And finally, can you think of one more quality that you value and you'd like to develop further? remembering what that quality is, and a time when you experienced it, at least to a germinal degree, as a start of as the start of that process. Now, bringing your attention back to your body, seated here, into all the different sensations in your body. And coming back to the room, your locality, by listening to all the sounds around you. And when you're ready, slowly and gently opening your eyes. So, we'll continue looking at ethics. We've already seen why it's maybe not such an attractive word. We've seen what Buddhist ethics is not, and hopefully got a taste for what Buddhist ethics is. But to understand what it is more fully, we need to look at another word, what might be a much more popular word, much more modern word in a certain sort of way, and that's the word karma. Karma. It's another word that has even more misunderstandings around it. People often think that it means fate. It's like our future, where we have no control. In Buddhism, quite the opposite is true. Karma implies choice, because every moment we have a choice about how to act, how to speak, how to use our minds. And what's karma? Karma literally means action. Or more specifically, in this context, it means intentional action, not just an unconscious reaction. It's something we decide to do. We also have the concept of karma-vipaka, which is the result of our actions. So we have karma and karma-vipaka. And we can make choices on how to act. Good karma, bad karma, so to speak. What's more, Buddhism tells us we can act in such a way, we can make these choices in such a way as to become happier, more open-hearted and connected. Or we can act in such a way as to become less happier, sadder, more closed and isolated and cut off. The teachings of Buddhism on ethics tell us which kind of actions have which results, positive or negative, desirable or undesirable. It's a complex topic, but Buddhism gives us 5 great principles of ethics, expressed in the 5 precepts. To tell us following which has positive results, which kind of actions have positive results for us and for others, and which have negative. So that will be the theme of our course, these 5 precepts, in the following weeks. And we can use our Buddhist meditation to give us the presence of mind, the awareness, to be able to make choices in the whirl of our everyday lives. So that's the path ahead of us. So there's one more thing about karma that I'd like to examine. Not only, as we've just seen, karma isn't fate, it isn't our predetermined destiny. But there's a question, is everything that happens to us the result of our karma? Buddhism teaches that no, it isn't. And why not? Why do you think? Or to understand the Buddhist position, we need to dive deeply into an important Buddhist teaching, the teaching of universal conditionality, what Sangharakshita has called the central teaching of Buddhism, universal conditionality, at least from the philosophical point of view. So, all physical and mental events arise in dependence on conditions and according to laws. This is what the teaching of universal conditionality tells us. And there are different spheres where these laws operate, different spheres of conditionality. And in early Buddhism, these came to be called niyamas. And Sangharakshita took this teaching and applied it to contemporary ideas to give a list its list of the 5 niyamas. And firstly, there's a physical, inorganic sphere, including the laws of physics and chemistry. Then the physical, organic sphere, including the laws of biology. Then we have the sphere of simple consciousness, instinct. These include to some extent the laws of psychology, this sphere of exploration of psychology. Then we have the sphere of self-aware consciousness, intentional action, conscious choice. This is where the laws of ethics come into the picture. This is a subject matter of karma. But the path doesn't end here. There's also the sphere of spiritual development. This means the laws and principles of the spiritual path, the dharma, which we in the West have started to call Buddhism, the path that leads to enlightenment, the path that leads to Buddhahood. But taking a step back, karma relates to the sphere of self-consciousness. When we make conscious choices with specific intentions, this is what karma is. But what we experience can come as the results, the consequences of actions from any of these spheres, any of these niyamas, the consequences of actions in the physical or inorganic sphere, the consequences of actions from the physical organic sphere, the consequences of instinctive actions, the consequences of self-aware actions, and the consequences of actions done for the sake of spiritual development. Can you think of examples from your life of consequences that you've experienced from each of these niyamas? It means, of course, that what we experience, the results of actions, the consequences that we experience, can come from any one of these niyamas, or from several of them working at once. So it's not true to say that everything we experience is our karma. Not at all. Also, while we're about it, I want to say just a little more about the Dharma niyama. We'll talk more about the Dharma in the 4th course. But for now, It's enough to say it's a collection of laws and principles of the path, of how to tread the path, of the nature of the path that leads to enlightenment, the endless end of enlightenment. For us, it's the laws and principles that enable spiritual development when we choose to follow them. Enlightenment itself is an unconditioned state, not dependent on conditions, but we can use conditions to move towards enlightenment. So the spheres of karma and dharma, the karma niyama and the dharma niyamas, are very important to us. They relate very specifically to the spiritual path, to our spiritual life. That was a little unplanned moment. So we've looked at the question in general of how to practice in everyday life, and given an introduction at least to the question, how to practice in everyday life. We've looked at what Buddhist ethics really means. We've seen that it means our relations with others and the world and the choices we make. So we're ready to start looking more specifically, looking at each of these 5 principles of ethics. That we usually call the 5 precepts. And these 5 precepts, they not only help us to develop spiritually, they also express how a Buddha naturally acts, the spontaneous action of a Buddha. Thus, they give us an ideal to work towards. Each precept has a negative and a positive form. What to move away from, what not to do, and what to move towards, what to do. What qualities to abandon, what qualities to embrace. Of course, this isn't following rules on autopilot. That won't get us very far. But inviting us to act from what is most aware, intelligent, and sensitive in us. And we'll start next week with the first precept, the precept of metta, of giving up all forms of violence and manipulation, acting from love, operating in the love mode, acting from a full awareness and sympathy, being like the sun, the living beings. Look forward to following on this exploration next week.